Okay, let's make a start then, folks. So thanks for attending. This is the first kickoff meeting for SIG control plane. It's going to be a fortnightly meeting going forward, so every 2 weeks, alternating with the AIE working group call. But yeah, this week we're starting off with control plane. If folks can add their names to the attendees list, add mine quickly because I forgot to do that. The agenda for today is pretty straightforward. I just wanted to kind of revisit the charter that landed for this group to kind of revisit what the initial scope was drafted to be. Just make sure that folks are still okay with that. It's quite high level and generic, but it's a good starting place, I guess, for this first initial call. The next kind of step from that is the owner's alias file PR that I've had open for a while, just to talk through where we left that, the state of it, and the potential next steps. The final thing on the agenda is just looking at things that I've randomly labeled towards the end of the 1.8 kind of cycle as potentially things that this new SIG can look to work on. There's lots of other stuff, but yeah, just have a look at that initial backlog and see if there's additional things that we can tag in there. That's a nice to have thing at the end of the agenda. If we don't get there, we don't get there. Um, yeah, so let's just start with the charter. Let me just close that off. So in terms of the charter for at the moment, I already have it open actually. And as is written in the document, actually, I'll just start the document. It's easier. The scope of the SIG initially was just to be responsible for the development and enhancement of the Kiva control plane. That's very open-ended, but that's the initial scope that we had. And within the scope of the SIG, we had the code binaries and services that make up the control plane, the maintenance of the core control plane components, such as the API, controller, handler, and operator. And this was to include the deployment, scalability, and overall performance of these components. As opposed to what was out of scope was the content of individual APIs that, yeah, as written here, it says as overseen by SIG architecture. I don't think SIG architecture ever took off. So I think that's kind of, yeah, that probably needs to be replaced with something a bit more generic because yeah, that's not a concept at the moment. We did create it at the same time, but it never took off. And it goes on to say owned by specific SIGs. And yeah, the second bullet point there is SIG specific implementations are also out of scope. So within the control plane components, and the example is network specific logic within the controller is obviously owned by SIG network and not by this group. As a starting point, it was meant to be very generic and high level. Do folks have any comments or concerns about the current charter? Is there any kind of thoughts about changing anything at this stage, or is it a nice kind of starting place? I'm just going to take silence to mean everyone's cool with it as a starting place for now, or doesn't care. Both are valid at this point. Um, okay, well, like I said, I'll go back and I'll probably remove the SIG architecture reference, Vladek, unless you do want to take that concept forward at 1.9. I can also clean up. I think it's referenced in other places in the community repo, so I can clean that up if we're not going to actually do anything with that.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think it's really needed. I think we wanted this SIG architecture only for like um, just as a bucket to put specific people there
Yeah.
to for for repo management things. But I don't think that we have anything like SIG architecture conceptually.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's cool. It was a good thought, but it hasn't worked out. So yeah, I'll clean that up. That's no problem. Okie doke. Um, so moving on then to the owner's aliases PR. If I scroll down to the bottom here, it's much back and forth in November. I think we left it with Eddie's kind of suggestion here of ultimately this group probably needs approvers from several SIGs, but as an initial stage, um, we could we should probably should just start with two initial approvers. And Eddie said nominated by the active architects, but I assume he just means maintainers really, because that's the only group that we've got. Um, it's a bit formal, but Vladik, would you be okay potentially just creating a PR to get Lubo marked as an approver for the SIG to begin with? And I've already put my name forward as well, but it's
Yeah,
obviously your discretion. Go on, sorry.
yeah, sure. I can definitely do that. What I wanted to say is that, I mean, in general, there will be topics like, for example, do we want to move to validating admission policies, or all of this discussion that we had around where and how we do validations. I think it belongs to this group as well,
Mhm.
and it really touches across the board. So Michael had opinions. I think many people also had different opinions. Jed. So I wonder how to actually do it. I mean, if we'll just nominate one approver or two approvers, is this enough, or is it?
Ultimately, no, I agree with that. I don't think it is enough, but it's a starting point, right? We've got to you could have seed the group somewhere somehow. Um, but by all means, if you want to nominate more people to begin with, feel free to. But I assume what Ed's suggesting is that we nominate two people initially. We start working through the backlog that we're going to touch on in a minute that does include the issue that you were talking about, the kind of organized, yeah, the central issue that I created to figure that question out.
Okay.
Um, and through that process, then we potentially find additional approvers from other SIGs, but then it's a case of myself and Lubo potentially nominating them instead of you having to nominate six people up front. I guess that's what Ed was kind of suggesting.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. Sounds good.
Yeah. But yeah, it's gonna take a lot more people because we're gonna have to build consensus for lots of decisions that are made by this group because they are going to have such a wide impacting um, impact. Sorry, Aral, you just raised your hand and blew up half my screen, apparently. Then go ahead.
So sorry for the background noise if you can hear it. What Eddie meant here is just to nominate two people and then nominate other people one by one.
Okay, yeah, but yeah, I guess yeah. It, my point is still the same. Like we don't have to do that all up front. Eddie's was more drip fed, so yeah, we can. At the moment, the chairs for the group are myself and Lubo. I'd like to be an approver in this, but yeah, Vladik, it's your call, obviously, if you want to kind of put that forward. And then we can, yeah, go through this process and add
Yeah.
more people in.
I'll open the PR today.
Thank you. It's a very formal approach. I was hoping to kind of avoid it potentially with this PR and just get Lubo as the initial approver and then he can nominate me kind of thing. But yeah, it works ultimately, hopefully. And there are several people in the PR that kind of raised their hand up for being reviewers, who are not here, I don't think, today, but Barack, Daniel from my team, to name two. So we should be able to get a number of reviewers in as well. I know Michael was up for it, and Earl, you're obviously here as well. So yeah, we should be able to get additional approvers and reviewers seeded relatively quickly, hopefully, he says. Cool. Yeah. as an initial plan, any comments, concerns about that? All right, go ahead.
Other than adding this SIG in the root owners file, do we intend to add individual files in individual directories?
We will. That's going to be a follow-on, I guess, once that's in place, once we've got the initial group populated, and we can start discussing the paths and everything that we potentially want to cover. It's going to obviously show up areas where we are tightly coupled at the moment. And I don't think we're necessarily going to want to claim ownership over SIG specific implementations that are kind of all bundled together in places. So I think, yeah, one of the first things we're gonna have to do is just map out for these components which paths, if any, we can actually take ownership for. I do have an ownership draft document. Oh, there it is. Cool. I did this a while ago, going through all the different paths and just figuring out bits that don't have any SIG kind of specific ownership. So I can make this public and we can kind of go through this and see if there's any easy wins. But it's just, generic component logic that we can take ownership of and maintain. But yeah, there's definitely going to be areas where there's going to be further work with the SIGs required. We'll obviously have to kind of document that and figure out if and when that could be extracted and simplified before we even think about touching a path. Does that make sense?
Can you please go back to the list of directories?
Yeah, I can make this public. Actually, no, can I? Because this is my Red Hat account. I did copy it over to my Google account just so I could make it public to upstream. Um, Let me just do. I can do this at least for you guys because you're Red Hat. Just put it in.
But I think you can just add permissions for the KubeVirt dev mailing list.
Oh, really?
I think so.
Oh, and that's enough. Is it?
Well, that's what I was doing until now.
Okay. Okay. All right, let's give that a go. I've never done that before, so should still be the same link, I guess. Just copy it one more time. But yeah, this was just asking Claude to kind of map out everything, looking at the owners files. Um, yes, not all of these paths are relevant to SIG control plane, obviously. The question was more generic than that, but yeah, there's definitely wins for us in there, I think, or things that we could potentially help with. So I'm just going to quickly go back here, um, just write that down. Cool. Just making some notes. So yeah, does that make sense? Just starting with the aliases changes, and then once they're in, we can kind of work through this coverage report, I guess, and just see if there's additional stuff that we can um, assign the group to.
Yeah, I think so. We need to have PLs to claim ownership of several directories, I guess.
Yeah, I could even just do an issue for it as well and just track it through an issue. Um, but yeah, I'll definitely follow up with that before the next meeting. Cool. Okay, and the final topic that I have for today is just quickly looking at the label, the SIG control plane label that I created a while ago, and just started slowly kind of applying to things that I thought might eventually be, part of this group. So Vladik, to your point, the tracking issue for agreeing the use of declarative kube builder, open API validations, that's part of it. I think the role of the SIG going forward is obviously going to be to um, coordinate this effort and the agreement of whatever comes out of this with all the other SIGs and potentially drive that a little bit. Yeah, that I don't envy us for because it's everyone's got an opinion on this one. So, but yeah, it's definitely something that I see us kind of pushing forward here, hopefully. The other things in here, like it's come up on the quality working group quite a few times about linting paths and all that stuff. So I did start that in the previous cycle, but things have got a bit hectic, unfortunately. So while this was reviewed, it never merged. So yeah, efforts like this, I think, are valid for this group as well to continue. The only other things that I've listed in here is a really old one from me about schema validation checks, actually, and if they're redundant in the webhooks, because Cube API already does a schema validation for us. Um, yeah, Vladik, go ahead.
I wonder if, I mean, this group should look at things like the controller runtime and what should we take from the controller runtime. I mean, we took the migration, sorry, we took the priority queue from there, but there are other aspects. For example, caching mechanisms and, like, for example, the boilerplate reduction that they kind of shine in this area. I wonder if we should, move more controllers into this type of, operational. Um, and like, who will determine if it's valuable for us or not? For example, when we did some optimizations for the migration controller, we saw that caching is being done there by differently, and I wonder if it really has a good effect on what we do. I don't know. Lubo, I think, had some opinions, but I don't remember already what. So things like that.
Yeah,
But just in
sorry.
general, yeah, sorry. I mean, just in general, just how we write controllers, how we write, um, where do we use, yeah, where do we use, and how we use informers and such.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, it definitely does. And if we have any artifacts, if it's an issue, if it's an enhancement or anything that relates to that, then feel free to label it with this SIG control plane label, and we can prioritize and figure things out from there. I know Felix has, I should have added this actually. Felix does have one about replacing a load of API with, I think it's from runtime. I think it's from controller runtime. There's some kind of Yeah, the API server that it comes bundled with or provides or something. There's another way of doing it that he recently did with Vert template. I'm forgetting all the details suddenly, but he does have an issue for that. But that might turn into an enhancement, and yeah, having that tracked and under this group, I think makes sense definitely. Yeah, and the only other thing there is like an RFE that I wrote up ages ago that, sorry about the background noise if it's coming through. There is this whole move to API priority and fairness and away from the client rate limiting that we currently have. Um, like that definitely fits, I think, this group as well, potentially. But it isn't a priority like downstream at the moment, but could be something that we just put in a backlog for this group and potentially get to it at some point in the future. Cool. I cannot see. Ah, is that okay? Yeah, he did. He did do that in the end. I wasn't sure if that ended up on the Google Summer of Code. Yes, this is it.
Yeah, this should be mentored by Felix and me as a commenter.
Cool. I don't see an issue listed off of it though. I'll
It's
ask Felix if there's something. Sorry.
yeah, I mean it's like the beginning. Like now is the beginning of the GSOC, so people will just go around and try things and contribute to KubeVirt. And I think by end of the month or in 30 days, we will have finally a period where we will be picking something or someone for this job or for this project. So I think after that we will have everything in place.
Okay, cool. Yeah, we can mentor them as part of this SIG. That makes sense. Cool. Thanks for linking it. Oh, okay. It's the Kubernetes API server library. It's not the runtime. Okay. Cool.
Yeah. By the way, if you think this is a good project, we can also write it as a GSOC to evaluate the library and showcase maybe some refactor to the library, show the pros and cons.
Yeah, potentially. If we still have time to submit GSOC stuff, I thought we were past it now. Sorry.
I mean, it's still in a phase where you can come up with a new project. Even the contributors can come up with a project, so I think it's still valid.
Yeah, because I was going to put in one about MCP, but I thought I ran out of time. Um, yeah, yeah, potentially we could put something generic in about just looking at our use of runtime and if there's any improvements to be made there. Um, I guess for this initial release cycle with SIG control plane being in place, it's going to mostly be about capturing these ideas and actually writing it down, putting it in some kind of backlog that we can see upstream at least, and potentially some of these things aren't going to be touched until the next cycle, but yeah, should definitely start.
And that's fine. I mean, like I was doing I was trying to arrange all the VEPs that we have for 1.9. Right now, the list is like 70 something.
70.
Yeah, I'll show you the tracker. I mean, some of them are like we need to remove. Some of them are probably moving from the previous releases. But right now, the list is 70 something. Adding more to it in this cycle, I think it's just crazy.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
but I think the beginning of a conversation is already valuable.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. And having a home for this place that isn't SIG compute and separating those conversations as well, I think will be valuable for SIG compute maybe not in this release cycle with 70 VEPs flying around, but hope potentially with the next cycle having a separate place for this stuff to be grew, discussed, tracked, and all that stuff. Like that will be helpful. And it's not part of the charter, but like the goal of setting up the SIG is to kind of help with that, right? It's to help deflect stuff from just landing in SIG compute by default and having a home for some of this more generic kind of control plane stuff to go. So yeah, it's definitely just even having this as a starting point, I think is useful. Yeah, I agree. Cool. That's all I had for today. I know it's a 1 hour slot, but in terms of next steps, does anyone have anything else that they think we should be kind of touching on in the next 2 weeks before the next meeting, other than sorting out the approvers, adding reviewers, and starting to go over this coverage report and figuring out paths and stuff, and obviously building out the backlog as well with the SIG control plane label. All right, go ahead.
Although what I want to say is not relevant for the next 2 weeks, but I think the SIG should start thinking of how we decouple SIG specific code from our controllers. So the core or glue logic of this project will be cleaner and linear, and all the SIG specific stuff will go into SIG specific directories.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder. Now we have the hypervisor thing and some others that kind of aggregate parts of this code and parts of some other bits. It's really, we need to come up with some kind of interesting separation point.
I mean, most likely we don't need to separate most of the things. You can still, or like separating it in a way that you can allow different SIGs to just own files, not packages. So I'm just saying that like there's different levels of separation, and it doesn't necessarily need to be a very high level separation with interface or anything like that, because you can have, for example, function defined in one file, and then the core will just be calling these functions, and then the SIG will be owning that file, but the core will be just maintaining the integration of this code. That's also something which I think makes sense.
Lobo, I want to refer to your last comment. I think what you said can work at the beginning, but I think this SIG's is in this SIG's interest that the unit tests will not contain a SIG specific code. And if you will decouple all the SIG logic from the core, then you can have cleaner unit tests that are not aware of SIG specific code.
Yeah, that's true. Absolutely. Like it's a today the situation is that we have one big unit test file with hundreds of lines, even thousands. So
Easily
if we can
thousands.
separate it, yeah, easily thousands. So yeah, definitely the separation is in place.
Yeah, I wonder if we can already write this up in a tracking issue, or else to kind of have it in the backlog and to have it as something that we're thinking about and throwing ideas around within an issue or something. Because we're going to need to kind of go through the components that the SIG is potentially going to look after and identify areas where things are tightly coupled and SIG logic is kind of all bundled together. And having an issue or something just to kind of write that down over time might be a useful starting point in 1.9. And by the time we get to 1.10, we could then pick one or two places potentially to kind of attack as a group. Does that make sense?
Yeah, although, so Aurel mentioned the unit tests, but I mean, for me, it was um, maybe more than that, or just different angle. I mean, I think that this group needs to put like a specific opinion when things that are related to this group are being changed, or somebody posts a PR that needs attention of this group. And I wonder how to handle that, because I mean, the code is really spread around multiple directories, even not separated into just vert controller or vert handler. So I wonder how to do that, because I mean, even the network, some of the networking aspects are in the networking directory. Some of the hypervisor specific parts are in the hypervisor, and then we have vert controller and we have the vert handler. So that's really like spread, not just in terms of domains, but it spreads across like multiple matrix of different logics. And
So are you in
yeah,
terms of just, are you talking in terms of us being notified or being like part of the approval review process for changes when they land, in the non-SIG specific parts of these components?
yeah. So for example, for some reason, the hypervisor code will be changing, something that is related to basically how informers work, or um, yeah, I'm not sure, or maybe one of the SIGs, like storage, needs to introduce new informers, or suddenly, there was an attempt to just query API instead of using informers. So I would prefer this SIG to be notified, and we would have a visibility uh, into these kind of changes. So I'm not sure if we can consolidate the code into a specific, like in one place. Um, yeah, maybe I'm not expressing myself correctly. I need to think about how to present it, but it just I'm not sure how, like, because this code controllers are spread into so many different domains. I'm not sure how to manage all of this in terms of this SIG.
Mhm. Yep, understood. Arel, I think you had your hand up, but I closed all my windows by accident.
So may I?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Thank you very much. So let me talk specifically about network. In SIG network, we had I think over a year-long effort to decouple the vast majority of network code from core components. And in this process, we've created interfaces and function pointers in specific places. So if network code changes, the core controller don't really care. They are fully decoupled. But what we do need to define is, on these integration points, we need to define the rules. So for example, several SIGs could be called from a certain point, and some rules should be set in place. For example, in this integration point, you can change whatever object, but you cannot do an API call, etc., etc. And we need to define several of these integration points, and SIGs would have to align themselves and to register their code into these places, and then core can evolve independently. SIG specific code can evolve independently, and then if SIG specific code evolves, then you just, as a core, you just don't care.
Yeah, no, I agree with that approach. I think in the short, sorry, my kids have just come home as well. My 2-year-old is very unhappy apparently. Um, in terms of like initial steps, Vladik, and flagging stuff up and making this group aware, that people are potentially trying to make changes to some of the core kind of aspects of these components. We don't necessarily have to put in ownership of these specific paths. The owners, oh my God, she's really upset. Sorry about the noise. Um, the owners files can also just add a label to PRs that touch specific paths as well. So that's another kind of way early on that we can just be notified and be aware, at least to begin with. But eventually, like the approach that Harel highlighted there is like, that's the direction we ultimately need to be going in, and defining rules and defining kind of best practices for integration with the SIG specific kind of logic and everything.
Also, it's in the SIG's interests. Like SIG network can now control its own stuff. I guess not all the SIGs can now make changes throughout the stack without needing a core approval.
Yeah, definitely. We did it with the instance type code as well. We extracted pretty much all of the logic. There's like one or two things that had to be left behind. But yeah, it made landing changes within package instance type super easy, and that was that stuff across webhooks, control plane, so controller even. Yeah, it was everywhere. So yeah, I'm fully on board with that. And hopefully that then allows us to kind of have tighter control over the more kind of generic parts of the component, and the initial logic in the controller, for example, that will define informers. That could be something that this SIG has oversight of, that initial like setup of the core controller. And so if someone was to add or remove an informer or wire it up incorrectly, like we would have oversight of that potentially and be able to kind of apply best practices to that as we see fit. Vladek, did any of that answer your concerns or?
Vladek had to drop.
Oh, sorry, I've not got it open. There we go. All right, I'm gonna have to close this window again. Addy says for ownership, I guess something like package controller, for example, makes immediate sense. Yeah, yeah, it does and it doesn't. I think depending on how does the ownership stuff, does it own all the sub packages there as well? That's my only concern. I forget exactly off the top of my head. But yeah, I can write up an issue to begin with to look into this potentially to kind of start talking about how we can potentially decouple and own the stuff. Um, I'm just worried that there's going to be stuff in like the root of package controller that is actually, compute specific. Probably is because it's everywhere. We don't necessarily want to have this SIG have ownership over that, but I might be being a little picky with that concern. Okay. Uh, anything else? Yeah, I think this is a good starting point for the SIG. Hopefully, we can get some momentum going in the next couple of weeks. Like I said, by the end of 1.9, have a decent handle on like the direction that we want to take things, and then into 1.10, have some concrete things that we can not necessarily implement, but rework and improve the life of everyone within the project, especially the SIGs and everyone. Cool. Well, thank you all for attending. I will obviously create the issue, go over the coverage report and everything, and do bits and pieces. But yeah, if there's additional stuff that comes up in the next 2 weeks, feel free to reach out on Slack, or yeah, just add to the agenda for the next call as well. I will get it pre-populated. And yeah, I do like having agendas ahead of time. So if you do have something, feel free to add it to the agenda before the call at the top of the agenda notes, and we will get to it. Awesome. Thanks all. I will catch you in 2 weeks. Bye.
Thank you. Have a nice week.
Bye, everyone. Have a nice weekend.